Hey everybody, Doug Schulze here with the Discovery ITOM Ranger team. Here we're talking about in our series about Discovery Better Practices and helping work your Discovery application to help get a little bit more and a little bit better work out of it. In this video, we're going to be talking about the properties, the old knobs and switches you can turn to help make Discovery just a little bit better for you. Now, Discovery properties, all you got to do is look to Discovery properties. And those are all set in there. Now, there's a ton of them in there. Many of them you don't have to change unless there's a specific requirement, maybe from support, or you see a property such as maybe adding the domain to your host name, to naming your CIs, those sorts of things. But, majority, 99% of the time, you really don't have to mess with these. But what we're going to talk about are some that I do mess with. Now, I want to highlight that note there around newer deployments may have these properties, or at least most of these properties, set out of box. So this is kind of talking to the entire world out there. Those of my friends have been doing Discovery as long as I have. But some of you that are brand new to Discovery and have brand new instances, hey, it only took me about 7 years to, and I'm not exaggerating, folks, 7 years to get these set out of box. But finally we convinced them these are the best ways. Some of the ones you may want to go through that are key are setting that trusted name source. Now, when you look at a Discovery property, you know what? Let's break out of this slide, and we're just going to look at the properties themselves. This will be much more fun and interactive than the other videos I've been doing. So I'm going to come down here to Discovery properties. So here we see that what we're talking about is the discovered name trusted name source. And that's the SSH, the WMI, and the SNMP. Now, many years out of box, we've relied on DNS, but we come across issues where we would get name flapping because one mid server may have a different resolver than another mid server, and it may have a different name. Maybe there are multiple names. So that name would keep flipping on every discovery or maybe every other discovery. So by checking these trusted name source values, you ensure that you're naming your CI records, at least from the base classes, exactly what the host has for a name, whether it's found through WMI, through the SSH, uname, or SNMP through sysname. So when you go in Discovery properties, highly recommend, if they're not already checked, check these 3 boxes. Now, the next property I like to double check, which again, for brand new customers is out of box, is the IP service affinity. Now, the IP service affinity is pretty important because it helps you understand that, I may have devices that have multiple protocols in a state of open. Think of a piece of network gear, a switch, a router in today's world. Not only is it going to respond to SNMP, our method of discovering it, but it's also going to represent or potentially represent that it has SSH or port 22 in a state of open. Now, out of box, when we go to discover that device for the first time, we're going to try SSH first, and we're going to talk about that, so keep that in the back of your notes. We're going to fail after going through all those all the Unix credentials to get a Unix classify failure. Network team's not happy with you because who in the world's trying to SSH to my network device? Now, after all those fail, we're going to try SNMP. And, of course, with the right read-only string and access to the device, we're going to discover it, populate the CMDB, and everybody's happy. Well, with this IP service affinity checked, what's that going to do is going to be able to set an affinity, just like our credential affinity, for those that are familiar with it, to say, hey, next time I come across this IP, I know I was successful with SNMP, and I'm going to try that first. So I eliminate the need to SSH to that device, make the network team happy. You don't have to chase down a Unix classify error, just identify, oh, this was a router anyway. And you're going to be able to be much more efficient in your discoveries. So definitely check this. Makes things work a lot better. Again, brand new customers, going to be checked out of box. But if you've been around a minute, you may need to check this yourself. And this is a legacy piece, as I like to say, from our horse-drawn discovery days. And one day this will disappear. Make sure this is unchecked. You do not want this checked. For a little history and trivia, how it used to be, Was our method of trying to offload resource processing from the instance and letting the mid server determine if a probe, back in our probe and sensors days, needed to be sent up to the instance. And unfortunately, the mid server just never got smart enough to determine if data was new or data was consistent or called stale or it didn't need to be updated. So definitely uncheck that box. With patterns, we don't have that problem as much anymore, obviously, because the pattern's going to collect everything regardless. But just in case, if you come across your instance and you see this checked, just out of good conscience, make sure to uncheck that box. Now, my next favorite thing to change, now this is not out of box. We're going to go to port probes. Now, we know that discovery port probes are the first, they are the first definition of what is executed in the Shazam probe. When we first go out and say, hey, go scan these ranges, we check for these ports. Now, of those IPs that respond with a classification port in a state of open, we then trigger our follow-on discovery. Go classify with Unix, go classify with SNMP, WMI, what have you. Now, these have a classification priority, as we see here. This column is not shown on a box, so if you don't see it, you may just want to add it. And we see that these protocols have this priority. Now, think back to our network gear scenario, where it says, hey, I'm going to do SSH first. Let me set this what it looks like out of box for everybody. So this is what it would look like out of box. In our network gear scenario, hey, I saw port 22 open and I saw SNMP is responsive. I'm going to try port 22 first because it has a lower priority. And then when I fail, I'm going to try SNMP and hopefully succeed. And then with that IP service affinity checked, know that I set that affinity. Why even suffer that drama in the beginning? We recommend is coming to these port probes and changing the priority between Unix and SNMP. So when I do come across those network devices, I know I'm going to try SNMP first. I'm not even going to go down that route. I'm going to discover that network device and set that IP service affinity. Now, for those of you thinking, well, I may have Linux or Unix devices out there that respond with SNMP. Well, if they respond with SNMP for a credential that you've loaded, fantastic. It may respond to it, but it's a lightweight query when we try to do our SNMP classification. We ask it very lightweight questions. But the key is understanding is in discovery, we do not have any classifiers for compute. Not to say we didn't. Horse-drawn discovery days, we sure did try. But we went to the protocol. We don't have Linux or any Unix systems in here that are looking to classify with SNMP. So we're going to pass right through this, not generate any error, and then move on to the next priority, which is SSH, discover, and find it accordingly. So hopefully these properties help you understand the value that can come up. Oh, sorry folks, forgot one. Glide.discovery ADM update applications. Now, grab this and search the docs page because you'll find it in a chart around what the details are. But bottom line is what it does, it helps make sure that your Apple table or your application table, CMDB, CI, APPL, is updated to the last discovery. Imagine this scenario. I discover a computer and I find IAS or Microsoft SQL running on it. And it's a great day. I discover it, build the relationships, everything's fantastic. Well, a week or two from now, I discover it again, and I do not find IAS or Microsoft SQL, or perhaps Apache, or whatever the case may be, running on that host anymore. What I will do now is go into the Apple table and set that application to non-operational. So you can ensure that your application data is as up-to-date and refreshed as your base configuration items discovery. Now, Again, along as what I said with the others, this is set out of box for newer implementations. But double check, make sure that you do have that set to true to ensure that you have good data quality. Well, I hope these proper properties help, and have great fun with them. And again, if you're newer, you'll probably have a lot of these set. If you've been around a bit, you may need to change a few. Thank you very much.